Welcome back, everyone, for another episode of The Desire to Inspire. And today's guest is joining me all the way from Fayetteville, Arkansas, at the University of Arkansas. Go Razorbacks.
Go Hogs.
McCoy. Chris, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, Manny. Great to join you.
So excited. Thank you. I'm really excited to have you on as a guest today. We met in Vegas several weeks back, off the cuff, totally random. And here we are. On this interview, and I'm so grateful for you, and I wanted to say I really appreciate you for taking the time, because I know our listeners and myself are really excited about doing this.
My pleasure to be here.
Exciting. So let's start off with you giving us a little bit of a background about who you are, where you come from, what got you on this journey to now being the CIO over at the University of Arkansas.
Yeah, wow. Well, it's been a journey overall, Manny. I've been in higher ed my entire career, 28 years. So I was adding that up. It's actually 28 and a half years been in higher education. And I started off as a really deep technical nut. I mean, I was a C programmer and working at Purdue University, and then grew my way over the years, worked at Purdue, worked at Iowa State, and moved on to a couple other schools, and moved up from being a programmer to like a team lead, to a manager, to a director of a college, a CIO, system CIO, and then here at the University of Arkansas as CIO at a tier 1 research institution. Great place to be, overall. So,
that's exciting. What brought you down to the University of Arkansas? Because I know you've had quite the journey in being in information and technology services for quite some time now. In fact, you were doing and overseeing basically the whole Minnesota State college system, correct, before this?
As the system CIO, there was a point in time where I was interim system CIO for about 12, 13 months there. Yeah.
It's exciting. And so where did you start off in the childhood frame of this? Were you a Midwest guy, upper Midwest guy? What kind of a role did your family play in this? Were they helpful and very instrumental in helping you reach those academic heights and kind of driving yourself up to reach these high ranks?
Yeah, so, one of the issues with me is, I guess at times I've been always a little hesitant to take on the big job, sometimes. I mean, my wife would always say, you're playing it too safe. And I always recognized that I had to grow, I had to learn and develop before I moved on. But what happened was when I became system CIO at the MnSCU system, the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities system, I recognized that I could take the big job. And after I left that interim position, I started looking around for jobs at big schools, CIO jobs, and interviewed a number of places. And I actually interviewed, I was a finalist at one school, a really fine school out west. And on December 23rd, I was called and told that I wasn't going to get the job. And I was really bummed. And then about a week or so later, my wife said, there's this opening at the University of Arkansas you ought to apply for. And my first thought was, wow, that's a school that I don't think I'm qualified for. But she said, apply anyway, just humor me. Right. I was feeling a little down. About the loss of the other position, but I did apply, and then over the next couple of months worked my way through the process and was eventually selected. Essentially, the end of May of that year, and for me it seemed like it was a perfect fit. Here was a university that was growing like crazy. It had a fantastic reputation in terms of athletics. We all have probably heard of the Arkansas Razorbacks. It has a tremendous fan base. It's one of the top programs in the country. And but in the midst of that, the institution has been growing in terms of students, but in terms of infrastructure, it was way behind. And when I learned about the technology, I recognized that really it was really low on the maturity curve. And there was a lot of issues. There's people issues, process issues, technology issues. And for me, my passion is bringing clarity out of chaos. And so when I saw the chaos, I thought this is a perfect opportunity to put everything I've learned over the last 20 some years into practice. And so I decided to step in with open arms and tackle the problems. I was given really a 5-point charge when I came. I was told, number one, we need to bring the IT community together. We had lots of people across campus doing their own things, typical decentralized IT. And so they wanted one team on campus. Number two, they said, look, we're doing things very inefficiently. We need some efficiencies. We need to save money, not to cut costs, but so we can redirect those dollars into other things where we need to grow and develop. Number three was we had processes that needed to be matured. And so we need to move forward with that. Number four was we needed to advance. We needed to modernize our technology in some key areas. If not, become a leader in some of those nationally with some technologies. And number five was University of Arkansas is part of a big system. We're the flagship school, but we're still part of a big University of Arkansas system. And the system president challenged me to really act like a leader. He said, look, you guys need to stop talking about being a flagship institution and start acting like one. And one of those key areas where we can do that is with technology. And so I accepted that 5-point charge. And I like to tell people this. It came from three main people: a chancellor who was retiring, a provost who was moving on to be the president at the University of Toledo, and from a CFO who was interim. So those three had nothing to lose when they gave me that charge. And that's what I started with overall here.
Why do you think it is that an institution like the University of Arkansas has a decentralized IT environment? Or why are there issues in it when you walk into it? Why hasn't somebody figured this out yet if it's such a prestigious place to be at and such a place that we know of from athletics and academics perspective? Can you talk to me a little bit about that, please?
Yeah. So this is very common. It turns out to be very common in higher education. When I was at Iowa State University, I was in the College of Engineering, and there we were decentralized as well. You have to look back to the beginning of technology and how it grew. And remember, really the heart of technology, or at least computing technology, is within higher ed. Think about this. The first electronic digital computer was built at Iowa State University in the 1930s. And over time, as computing technology grew and emerged, it was sort of thought about as being this tool that people used in many different ways. There wasn't this concept of trying to manage it across an environment. It was a tool that was used for computation, or a tool that was used for graphics, or it was a tool for use, for this purpose or that purpose. And each of those purposes were standalone. And so you think about a university, well, in engineering, engineering ramped up their own tools for their own use. Central University ramped up their own databases for their own use, right?
Right.
Math and the other sciences had tools that they ramped up for their uses as well. And so you had, by nature, you had this distributed group of folks providing support. Over time, especially within the last 20 years, we've seen really this focus on really this enterprise management of technology. But you have this problem. You have universities that are traditionally very slow to change, decentralized. You have this push today to really think about managing technology well in an enterprise, and you have to move from one to the other. And so that was the case here at Arkansas, just like at many other tier 1 institutions. But it was exacerbated here more by the fact that central IT focused on really just a core set of technologies, and folks in the colleges and departments, they focused on just things locally there. And of course, there was a lot of duplicated services throughout the organization as a whole. And even more so, I think there were personality issues, there were people issues, there were fiefdoms that were developed, that were grown. And so you had one group that was doing their own thing that might be duplicating something that another group was doing entirely. And they didn't even talk to each other overall, right? And this happened throughout the whole institution, maybe a dozen or so of these groups. that were duplicating services or creating their own services overall. Yeah.
So if I'm you,
Yeah.
and I'm appointed as the new CIO for the University of Arkansas, where do you start?
Yeah.
How do you begin to plan out the new trajectory for the IT department?
Yeah. So when I was at Iowa State, I said, I knew exactly how this had to happen. And I said, if I ever get in a position of being a CIO, I know what I'm going to do. And it boils down to a people, process, technology approach, right? Those are the three things that you have to focus on: people, process, and technology. Technology is easy, okay?
Right.
Process is tough because the culture has to buy into it first.
Right.
But the first thing that you have to focus on is the people issue. You build a team, you get the team together, you can start to change the culture, which will then allow you to change the processes and so on. At any time along the way, you can focus on technology. So I came in focusing on the people right away. Week number one, I took my central IT leadership off for an overnight retreat. And we had a meeting of the minds. There's a process that I use, a technique that I use to draw out all of the issues that are bugging them, to get things on the table, to make it very safe so that we can all think about what it is that's generating the animosity, right? Week two, I took the distributed IT leadership off for an overnight retreat, did the same thing. We couldn't work it out in week three, but by week four, we brought the teams together, both teams. So this group of people, it was sort of like two sides and this animosity, right? And it's about healing the team, building the team. We found some simple things that we could all agree upon to work on first. We called them rocks in the road. So think about as you're walking down a path, right? And you trip over that rock. And it's like, you got to get rid of that rock or you're just going to keep tripping over it. So we had 17 little tiny projects where there was some topic that kept coming up, right? Every time we'd think about moving forward, someone would point back and say, oh yeah, but that thing that we did in the past keeps getting in the way. Right. So we wanted to remove that thing so we could go that way, right? And so we took those 17, finished those off. In some cases, it was just a discussion. And then after that, as part of that week 4 general summit that we had, and actually, get this, it was a summit on top of one of the local mountains. Okay, so it was symbolic as well as very real. But out of that came a whole set of other things that people recognized we had to work on. So while everybody was working on these 17 projects, we were working towards putting together this bigger initiative that we could all work on in a very deep, profound way, and that became our Achieve IT initiative, which was 26 major projects to fix all of these things that had been identified as not having been addressed over the last several years at the institution. And we're now in the middle of that Achieve IT initiative.
Right. And so how do you continue to keep that culture alive within the institution and the department more specifically?
So it started off, I spent time meeting with the folks as best I could. Eventually, I put together a weekly CIO chat, a web-based chat. So part of it's in person, part of it's in the web. We focused on communication. And one of the key ways was to recognize that everybody can add value. Right? So one of the 5 things that I focus on is collaboration and teamwork. So we had a whole bunch of projects, and traditionally those would either be done by central IT or by distributed IT. Well, I said, look, anybody can be a part of these projects. So I invited folks to the table to be a part of these different projects from across campus to provide their input. Sometimes it was just to listen, other times it was to ask questions. In some cases, it was to provide expertise. So we got people involved with those. We had part of Achieve IT focuses on shared services, which is meaning rather than one group having their own service, we find a way to look at that service and provide it once in one way on campus. And so we started 3 work groups from all across campus to come together and discuss what the shared service would look like overall. And so these teams, that was another way to drive forward that we were a one team, that everybody was involved. And I kept communicating to them. I said, look, I'm the campus CIO. I'm not the CIO of central IT. I'm the campus CIO. So that person who's out in the department is as much a part of my team as that person who's here at the central IT shop. I said, you offend that person, right? You're offending one of my team members. So they all understood that I was the team coach for this whole environment. And so just continuing to communicate that every chance that I got, working with the distributed folks, working with the people they reported to, like the various deans or vice chancellors or so on, just letting everybody know that we were going to focus, we were going to be one team. That was the goal, and it was about respect.
Right. Yeah, I can see where it comes from. But I do have a very interesting question, because I've spent my time around several different IT professionals in various fields. And the one thing that I've noticed that their personality speaks to is being introverted.
Yes.
And I don't know why that is. It's just an observation, but I've noticed it, and it seems that that's kind of the way that they do things. And you seem to be the complete opposite. You had to focus on the technical side of it and really drive the IT part, but then also realize that in order to be a good leader, you have to work on the people side of it. So how did you bring that all together? Where did you learn your people skills, and where does that come from? Because in most cases, I feel like these guys, they really do sit in rooms and they just program, they compute, they type things in, and they work with codes and things like that. So can you help me understand how that works for you?
Yeah, the typical picture we have of that really deep technical programmer is they work in a dark room that has no windows, right? And every once in a while we laugh, every once in a while we throw tokens underneath the door so they can go out to the vending machine and eat.
Right.
And, and they hate being with people and so on. I'm sort of interesting in some ways. I'm introverted, in some ways I'm extroverted. I do get a lot of energy from working with people, working with teams. And but the key for me is I focus on authentic leadership and learning authentic leadership. And I learned that I was at Iowa State University, and one of the deans that I reported to there came from private industry. And he started talking about things like theory of constraints and leadership. And I was sort of not really knowledgeable about what he meant. And so I started reading books from like Ellie Goldratt, It's Not Luck, The Critical Chain, and those types of books. And it challenged my thinking. And then I got into, I sort of tripped over some books by John Maxwell on leadership. And I started just reading all of these things and other similar books on leadership. And I started recognizing that leadership was really very different than what we thought of as typical technology overall. And, I just began developing that way. I like to think in terms of there's different types of CIO personalities, and there are different types of needs for organizations, right? On the one hand, there's sort of the manager, the operations guy who makes sure that everything runs well, okay? Sort of on the other end is that visionary, the strategist, the business innovator, that person who's always thinking about what's way out there, right? I'm sort of in the middle here. I'm sort of a fixer. I sort of transition people from focusing on management and operations to being more visionary and strategic overall. And so as part of my effort and how I deal with this, I take the leadership concepts, which really are about forward thinking, right? And I try to teach people, train people on leadership. I'm leading a team right now through Maxwell's 21 Laws book, and they're just eating it up. Right? I teach them about that. I teach them about concepts such as future state planning, which is a leadership paradigm, not a management paradigm. I teach them about innovation management overall, and the innovation life cycle, the curve that goes along with that. So I challenge them to think very differently rather than just about the bits and bytes, the bit twiddling, speeds and feeds of technology. And from that, that's where you get the team synergy that challenges people to grow way beyond where they're at. So even a technologist, even your basic technologist can understand these concepts. And when they get it, what you end up with, in my experience, is you get a team of overachievers, right? These people that you would normally think are going to operate at this maximum level, and all of a sudden you see them come together and they're operating way above that point overall in delivery. So, that's sort of a summary of the process, the mental thinking that I go through.
Right.
Base.
And as a leader, let me ask you this question. How much time do you invest into yourself and continuing to develop your skills?
Not enough. Wherever I get the chance, I try to scan books and stay up on it. And it's like anything else. It goes in waves, right? One of the things I knew when I came on board here I wanted to do was focus on leadership development. But before I could do that, I had to focus on just some basic people interaction, right? So now I'm at the point, beginning of summer, where I started with a team working through Maxwell's 21 laws, and I'll take another team through that here shortly, and then we'll dig on to another series, the Leadership Challenge, which is a much more in-depth study. But for me, part of that development is relearning it, right? You see it again and again and again. I know you and I, we talked a little bit about how we learn, right? And we just have to let it soak through us time and again before it sort of sticks.
Right.
Well, I think that's true with leadership too. You can't just read something once or go to a seminar once and you've got it. You have to just keep immersing yourself in it so that you begin to understand the concepts and see the nuances in what you're trying to do. And that's how I really approach it overall. I think the biggest thing for me is the mentorship is a way for me to learn.
Right. So how do you divvy up your time in between managing all the operations and being the visionary and the innovator, and also getting to be able to teach the principles and spend the time with the team?
Yeah. So one of the great lessons I learned years ago, one of the mentors that I had said, look, if you want to be excellent, surround yourself with people of excellence. Okay. So I have with me, around me now, a core group of people. I have a deputy CIO who's young and eager and aggressive and wants to learn, and very highly motivated and very technically very good. We just hired an associate CIO who had been a former CIO. And she's aggressive and she's got great ideas. She knows how to lead and so on. I've got a great executive assistant. I've got a growing, hungry budget manager and all of these other folks. So I'm surrounding myself with people who help me get things done. I delegate, right? I try to delegate. I want to empower them to do things. I mentioned in the Achieve IT, we have 26 projects. My project manager, who we just back up just a moment, there was no project management when I stepped into this role a year ago. So in that time, we've hired project management to help us understand how to work through these projects in a process-oriented way. Well, he tells me we have over 150 projects on the books that we're juggling, that we're balancing right now.
Right.
So we have not only these 26, but then we've got this other 120 some projects that we're trying to figure out how to manage. So we're moving very quickly. For me, it's, the law that we worked on last week in the 21 laws, the law of priorities. It's about constantly reassessing and reviewing your priorities, sometimes daily, sometimes weekly, making sure that you're staying focused on those projects overall, continuing to drive them home to your community, right? The IT community across campus. Let them know, give them opportunity to participate, stay focused overall. Then instead of just picking off 2 or 3 a year, which is pretty common, right, for a CIO, 2 or 3 big projects, we might be able to get 24 projects on, or at least progress on 24 projects in a year, because we've got everybody lined up to participate in some way.
Wow, such great information. You brought up the word delegate.
Yeah.
And imagine I'm listening here and I don't necessarily have the resources to make the confident decision to start to let go of all the responsibility.
Yeah.
What kind of advice do you have for somebody that, might be in just a bowl of overwhelm to push back and say, okay, I need to hand some of these projects off if they're feeling like they might be stuck in that thought? Do you have some sort of a process that you could talk about for them?
Well, again, I think the key is you got to surround yourself with people of excellence, right? You've got to build a team that you trust, and they have to be a team. As a CIO, I think you've got to let go of this notion that somehow you know everything and you can do everything and you can control everything, right? You have to instead, in my opinion, is think of yourself as more of a coach, and you're going to get yourself a team of coaches. And just like Coach Bielema, the Razorbacks head football coach, he's got a quarterbacks coach and a defensive coach, a defensive line coach, defensive secondary coach, and so on. And so he's got these excellent people, and he hands off the responsibility to them, right? So you've got to have that excellent group of people first. Get the best you can. Get the best you can.
Right. Don't
think about whether that person's going to look better than you. You want them to look better than you, for crying out loud. That's your job as a CIO, is to build up your team and give them all of the resources. But then you've got to figure out what's most important for the organization as a whole. And then you got to hand off, and you got to stay in constant contact with folks. Not because you're trying to control them, but because what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're operating as one cohesive team. You have to demonstrate teamwork and collaboration at the top before everybody gets it throughout the organization. And so, you figure out what's most important, and you're constantly in contact. Right. I mentioned that I'm in the middle of this office. We're redoing our office space. And I've got my deputy and associate CIO sharing an office just right around the corner from my camera here. And there's a door between us. And throughout the days, that door is open. And the door behind me is to my budget director. And throughout the days, that door is open. They hear the conversations. They participate in things that are going on. And we can yell out back and forth. And we feel like we're one team, as opposed to this group of disconnected people, right? And that's part of the energy, I believe, and the secret sauce of understanding how you drive a team forward is you got to act like a team. You got to build that team environment. You got to demonstrate it for everybody, and then you just got to expect it.
So how would you build that team environment?
Well, I remember, so when I started, I had a group of associate CIOs. I think there were a total of about 6, and a few of them have retired now. And when one of them retired, who happened to be the deputy CIO, David, who is my current deputy, I sort of tested him, right? I gave him an immense amount of responsibility to see what he would do. And I was looking for execution. I was looking for loyalty and commitment to the organization and to me, right? And I was looking to see if he could make wise decisions. Because after all, in the end, the deputy is somebody who, when I'm not here, makes decisions on my behalf, right? He's my second in command. And so when I saw those things, I recognized that he had the capability to fill that role overall. He came through with flying colors. Right. And quite honestly, he did the search for the associate CIO, and we hired somebody who had more experience than David, right? And so he recognized how important it was to get great people, and so that it's about making sure, again, you get this. You start with a couple of core people, and then you just keep building, and you set the expectations really high. Now, David will accuse me of setting a really high standard, right? Really high standard that may not be achievable, and I get that, and that's what I'd love to do. But if we don't have something to shoot for, right, we're never going to get there. We're never going to go in the right direction. We'll give up somewhere, too early, and so we really do want to set that high standard.
And do you have the autonomy to set the standards for the department, or is the institution involved in that and they say, no, you need to do it this way?
So one of the things when I walked in, at our institution, the lead administrator is the chancellor. And the chancellor reports to the system president, and the system president reports to the board. And so as I was being recruited, the system president called me. And he encouraged me to really consider this position. And what he told me is that because we're the flagship, we have visibility at the board level. And the board encouraged him to call and make sure that the candidates knew that they would have support all the way from the board down for all of the decisions that had to be made. And so I felt very comfortable in the midst of having the three top leaders of the institution in somewhat of a changing circumstance. I felt comfortable that I had support from the system president and then the board. And then after I arrived, I spent some time with one of the board members who filled me in. He was chairing the technology subcommittee, and he expressed his support for me as well. So I felt like from the board and the president, I had lots of support. But then I got here, and the provost and then the CFO was named permanent. Both are great guys. I mean, they hand off to me the autonomy to make the decisions in my area. And I don't take that lightly. You can't be cavalier. So what I've endeavored to do is along the way is to make sure my integrity is beyond question, to make sure that I deliver with excellence in whatever I do, that I make wise decisions overall, that I meet their expectations before they can even express them. And that way, when we go to meet, it's not about them trying to tell me I need to do X, Y, and Z. It's discussing the nuances of what's happening in the role and how we're trying to navigate this really tricky situation on campus overall. And so, I feel blessed to have landed here with such great support from upper leadership, again, from my boss all the way up to the board throughout. I can't think of a better place, a better position to be in right now.
You keep bringing up the word flagship. I'm not sure that I understand that just yet. Can you help clarify that?
So the University of Arkansas system is comprised of a number of institutions. We have two-year schools such as community colleges.
Okay.
We have universities such as the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, okay. University of Arkansas, Fort Smith, Pine Bluff, Monticello, and so on. And then we have a couple of semi-research institutions. There's the Division of Agriculture, which houses our cooperative extension, our ag experiment station, and so on. All of these are individual institutions that report up to the president. But the University of Arkansas is the school where the system started. So the president essentially was here and then transitioned up. But more importantly, we're also a national and international school, where the other schools are typically regional or statewide. They might even be local in terms of their scope. So if you think about it from the concept of flagship, we're the one when people think of the University of Arkansas system, they think of us. We're the one that's supposed to put the face on the University of Arkansas system.
Okay.
So we're the leader of the system from the perspective of being the first school, the biggest school, the most renowned, and so on. And that's really what we think of for flagship schools.
It's a new system to me. Much like what I would think of, see, here in Nevada, we only have one university, and it's University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I think of like a California where they have the state colleges, and then they also have the university system.
Right.
And there's multiple, but I don't necessarily know that they have flagships, and I know certainly that the 2-year colleges, the junior colleges, I think they operate independently. So that's why I was so confused as to what the flagship meant. That's a pretty unique system.
Yeah, so there's a number of systems throughout the country, right? So if we take the Minnesota state system, it has 7 universities and then 25 2-year schools. And the 2-year schools could be community colleges or technical colleges, or there are some that are community and technical colleges overall. So the Minnesota state system is like the 5th largest in the country of its kind. But again, every system is somewhat unique in terms of its consistency of the schools and organizations that are part of that system. But there's a whole bunch of them throughout the United States overall. Minnesota, Arkansas, there's a couple in New York, the state universities of New York, the SUNY system, right? As you mentioned, in California, you have the California State and the University of California systems. I think there might even be a 2-year system in California as well. So, wide variety of these.
Right. So learning something new every day.
Yeah, that's the goal, right? I can even teach Manny.
Yeah. Trust me, and there's plenty to teach too. I'm a sponge for learning. Yeah. So what are some of the trends that the university, I want to say the Razorbacks now, I'm going towards this word, the Razorbacks. It's
right.
So fun to say. What are some of the trends that the Razorbacks need to be aware of now in today's changing technology market?
Yeah. So we have operated at this university with pretty old technology throughout. That's the crazy thing is that a university like this should be on, I wouldn't say necessarily the cutting edge, but up towards the cutting edge of technology, and the really mundane things, right, are things like our network infrastructure, our telephone system, our database system overall, our lab environment, and how much, whether we use cloud email. And so all of these things are things that are going to be changing for the students. But some of the great things that we continue to focus on that we think are going to be even more exciting into the future. We have some work that's beginning on virtual reality. So augmented reality with the HoloLens, for example, or virtual reality, whether we're talking Oculus Rift or the HTC Vive or other things. Maybe even the hope is eventually is to get a cave environment. So, the box that you step into, we all think of the holodeck on the Enterprise, right? But it's a box where you put on glasses and the pictures on the wall that are projected on the wall make you feel like you're in an immersive environment. And so that's an interesting area that we're wanting to try to get into. Across campus, there's some really interesting research. We have a lab called the Tesseract Lab. This is ultra uber cool. The leaders of this lab, the leader of this lab is he's a professor of classical literature. Right? Wait a second, high-tech classical literature, how does that work, right? I mean, it's crazy. But what he's been able to do is he uses the Unity game engine, and he builds a game that you either you either do something like an Xbox type interface, or you put on the 3D the VR goggles, the Oculus Rift or something, and you maneuver through this game, and it looks like a regular game that you would buy off the shelf. But in order to maneuver through the game, you have to have read the book, understand the cultural aspects of the book, and use the cultural teaching to be able to have interactions with people or things within the game in order to win the game, right? So, you might be in classical Rome, and you have, in order to go through the marketplace, you have to do things like you would learn from the book. And so it's a discipline called gamification or game-based education, right? And this is something that this Tesseract Lab is a leader in overall. And we see huge demand for this course. It's taught as an online course, but there's enormous demand, and it was just recently named a full-blown center here, and something that we think is going to just continue to grow and boom in higher education, because it uses fun ways to interact with things in order to learn really important and deep concepts overall. And of course, you can then get statistics as students go through this. You can see where they're getting hung up, and you can learn other things about how to teach students certain concepts that they may not be understanding overall.
That's neat.
So yeah, so there's that, and then we have our Macmillan Retail Research Center, where they're doing things with autonomous vehicles, whether you're talking drone delivery or robot delivery running across the ground, and or even just learning buying habits. Right? They have like a store shelves set up, and they can see as you walk in what product you're looking at, from your eyes, and be able to interact. So there's so many things that are happening. This is the fun part of being in a research university, is all of these cool things that are taking place.
These conversations were being had 10, 15 years ago about the future. Now the future is here, and we're really, one day away from a robot, and, obviously we have drones already, but it's unbelievable to hear those types of words. Right now, it blows my mind.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. How do you think your IT strategy will impact the students' learning experience across campus?
So the University of Arkansas has a big challenge as an institution. So think of us as a business, right? We're a university. And two of the things we measure ourselves on have to do in the area of student success. So it has to do with retention rates. So a student starts here, think about their freshman year, their 2 semesters. Well, are they retained? Do they stay here? Do they continue on to their sophomore and junior level, and so on, right? So the retention rates. And then the other is our 6-year graduation rates. So in a period of 6 years, you enter as a freshman. What's your rate of, what's the rate of students graduating at the end of 6 years? Well, Arkansas happens to be at the bottom of the SEC. And so one of the things the institution is focused on heavily is the collection or the analysis of the data analytics, to try to understand the habits of our students and to try to understand patterns of success. And so where we see problems arising, then you have to develop methodologies, interventions, to interact with those students so that you don't lose them. It's like how you would retain a customer if you're in retail, right? You want to keep them being a loyal customer. For us, it's not only about retaining them as a customer and a student, but we understand as an institution, we know that our society is successful if those students are successful, right? And so we have this sort of mandate as an institution to try to help students be successful in their education. And we use the technology systems to collect and analyze data that then inform us as human beings about how to interact with those students one-on-one throughout. So I think that's the big push that we're going to see this fall coming up for the institution.
In technology terms, website terms, it's like the bounce rate, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly the same thing.
They come to your website, they go off. What did you not do to keep them there to convert?
Right. And some of it might be our fault, right? We might be making it really hard for them to succeed in some way. And part of it might be that it's the student's fault, right? We know that students are retained longer. Things like if they're employed, if they have a part-time job at the institution, they have a higher likelihood of being retained than being lost, right? We know that students who are involved in clubs and activities have a higher retention rate. Students who are engaged in other aspects of the university, even attending football games.
Right.
We know there's a relationship to retention for how those students are engaged overall in their experience. So it's not just do they get good grades and they're happy. It's do they understand the purpose for being here, how they can contribute, and what it means as they leave the institution. Remember, as an institution, every single institution is building a student who's defined by a certain culture And that culture they carry with them when they go out into the world and work and live, right? They get 4 years here, and we help them develop a culture that we think is indicative of the Razorbacks.
Right. And in most cases, that's when, unfortunately, the learning curve stops. So in most cases, the last impression in people is the university that they've gone to or whatever further education that they've finished up with after high school. Because after that, you're working. And as you know, in most cases, there's no extra education. You have to really take that upon yourself to do it. And I know in Vegas, you know, if you work in casinos and some other places, you get the occasional systems and policies tests or updates. But besides that, that's it. You're just working. Like, you're just doing what you're supposed to be doing. And you're using the knowledge and the information most of the time that you got from college.
Right.
So it's an interesting little way there. But
now I will say this, though, that one of the things that's happened over the last 5 to 10 years in higher education is a really big focus on lifelong learning, right? So as we've developed more online systems, we want students to continue to come back and get education, you know, graduate certificates and so on. And so that becomes an increasing part of our strategy as institutions is to attach to local companies or even to our alums and make sure they want to come back and get fed again and again.
I agree with you. Listen, I've picked up plenty of extra classes at UNLV right here for continuing education just to go and keep the stimulation going. I feel like you're alive when you're learning. That's the truth. There's such a joy that comes with that. And you have to find that, right? Because without that, I don't think you're growing. If you're not growing, I think you're dead.
Exactly right. Well, you know, you and I talked. I completed my master's program sort of not as a young person, just you know, about 6-7 years ago. I completed my master's program, and I was a much better student as an adult than I was as a young person. I was very focused, and it meant a tremendous amount to me. But I will also say I had the greatest time of my life in that program. I was really sad to see it go because I felt alive, as you said, refreshed, and I was engaged with some of the smartest people at the time in Iowa, and you know, it was just very rewarding in terms of the experience. Yeah, the education was great too, but the whole package to me was absolutely wonderful.
That's great. And let me ask you this question. So what do you enjoy most about being a CIO?
What do I enjoy most? Well, I think for me, it's about making a difference in people's lives. I mean, you might think it's about technology, exploring technology, making it all work, but for me, it's an opportunity for me to set the pace in terms of focus on leadership and the people aspect of the people process technology, right? I thoroughly enjoy seeing people transform from being sort of, you know, narrowly focused to being that more broad focused, but also growing tremendously in things like leadership and teamwork development, IT community development, and creativity and innovation, and so on. That to me is by far the most rewarding aspect.
Right. It always seems like it comes back to what contribution you can make back to somebody or some community, how much you can be of service to somebody. I feel like that without the people to be there for, life is meaningless.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
It's exciting. So let's talk about the transition from the upper Midwest to the South. Was there a bit of a culture shock for you there?
Well, this is my first move below the Mason-Dixon line.
Okay.
I grew up the son of a retail manager and lived in about 15 different places before I graduated high school, from Idaho to Indiana. And so that was my whole life growing up. For me, the transition was over the last 6-7 years was quite interesting. I mentioned the master's program. I earned my master's degrees, so master's in business administration and systems administration. And from there, that was like 2009. A year later, I was at Iowa State, and Iowa State was facing this immense financial crisis. And so as a result of that, the College of Engineering sort of decimated all of the middle management. I remember there was one day, sort of like a Black Monday, and I was the first, and there was a whole group of people that were laid off. And within about 3 months then of that, I actually accepted a job up in Minnesota at Metropolitan State University as the CIO of the institution. Was there for a couple of years, was asked to be the interim CIO for the Minnesota State system. And then following that, decided it was time for me to look for bigger schools. And of course landed down here in Arkansas, which was an interesting, life transition and set of challenges for me. But what I found was something, in all my moves throughout the years, I don't think I really paid attention to this, the slight cultural differences of the regions of the country. Minnesota, you're indoors 9 months out of the year through winter, and you live in the summer outside for the most part. In Arkansas, you're inside during the summer and you live out the 9 months of winter. And so it's just sort of backwards. But the people here are genuinely really nice and welcoming. It's surprising. I think the thing that I remember most, I had been here maybe 4 weeks, and I went out to a local hamburger fast food shop, and I grabbed a hamburger, and I was walking out the door, and I noticed through the double doors, here was this truckload of probably road workers in their bright orange vests, big guys, dirty, look really big and strong. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to give them some room here coming through the doors. Well, the first one came through. He saw me standing inside, held the interior door open for me. The guy behind him held the exterior door open for me. And as I'm walking through, they said, "Have a good day, sir." I'm thinking, man, I'm not in Kansas anymore, right? It was just very different overall. So we've thoroughly enjoyed the culture, the people, the Southern hospitality down here, and just being involved with life. My wife grew up in Ames. And so, Ames being the home of Iowa State University, and her father was a faculty member, she really wanted to get back to that university town. And Fayetteville is that university town. It's on all of the lists. It's always one of the fastest growing, or it's one of the highest quality of life cities around. It gets high marks everywhere, and it shows. I mean, it's a place you want to be when you're here.
Right. And you're close to big cities like Dallas and Oklahoma City. You're not far from St. Louis, Kansas City, right? I mean, so you have quick access to all these other great places.
I mean, it's all relative, right? I lived in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and to drive across the Twin Cities, I would say in normal traffic was an hour drive. Okay. So here we are in Fayetteville. It's 5 hours to Dallas and 3 hours to Little Rock, if you can call that a big city. And a couple hours to like Oklahoma City and so on. 3 hours to Kansas City. So it's, we're not out in the middle of nowhere. And we're in a corridor in this part of the state where there's several 100,000 people. So there's several cities that are together in this metropolis area. And of course, just up the road, a half hour from us, is the Fortune 1 company, Walmart, right? And its headquarters and a few other headquarters around. So we have some big companies. We have plenty to do, but here it's not about city life. Right? I live in a part of the country. If I were to show you even outside the window here, we've got mountains that. They call them mountains here. They're really tall hills with lots of trees, lots of hiking trails and caves and waterways. And we have the nation's, just an hour east of here, the nation's only national river, right? So it's a national park that's a river, and it's really cool. So I had no idea coming down to Arkansas that all this was here, but quality of life is super high here.
It's exciting. You look like you're having a blast. You sound like
best year of my career last year. Best year, bar none, of my career.
I'm happy for you, man. I'm so happy for you. You know, it's the truth. We want to be in an environment that cultivates happiness. And at the end of the day, you know, it really shows through in your personality and with your excitement talking about, you know, being able to make the changes that you want here at the institution. So I'm proud of you, my friend. I'm glad to hear that you're enjoying yourself down there. Before we finish up, I always ask the same question, and it is, what is your one message of inspiration for our listeners?
One message of inspiration. So this is a saying I latched onto a few years ago that I took to heart. The mark of true leadership is not how great you become, but how great the people around you become. And I really take that to heart. My passion is to make other people successful. And in doing that, I feel like I'm a success overall. And so that's why I'm here. And that's why I want to share my message with you and with others throughout. So take it, do your best, make the world a better place.
There you have it. What a pleasure it's been having you today, Chris. I think this was amazing, and I thought that you had a lot of great information. I know you've got your family in town. Mom and Dad are visiting from up north.
Yep.
In a way, you told me you're kind of still on vacation. Boy, I want that job.
Well, you know, the thing is that I should be taking the whole week off, but I have meetings all, you know, throughout the days, and part of the job is recognizing that you're on call 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's not a burden.
Right.
It's a joy. You use the term happiness. I would say joy.
Yeah. I love that word too. In fact, I actually use joy more often than not. My book is actually the word joy, finding joy. So
Gotcha.
Happiness, joy, they're all great emotions. They're fun. And it looks like, and it sounds like you're using both of them very well. So that's amazing. Again, you know, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. I know you're very busy and things are cranking over there in Fayetteville. And to be here with me and for our listeners means the world to me. And I know that they're going to appreciate it as well. And really had a good time with you today. It was amazing.
Fantastic. It was good to speak with you, Manny. And whenever you're in town, you come see me, right? And we'll do the town and show you around. So
listen, I'm going to make it to a Razorback game without a doubt. And in fact, I like, you know, that's a brand new place for me. So I've never been to that area of the country. I think it would be a phenomenal experience. And now that I have you, I'm definitely going to take you up on that. And I think it will be a lot of fun.
Sounds great.
Mr. Awesome, man. Thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate you, bud.
Hey, pleasure. Take care, Manny.
Take care.